Some WWE matches didn't just break the rules, they obliterated every line of decency, danger, and sanity. Blood-soaked brawls that never should have aired, women stripped of dignity and dumped into pools of gravy like it was some twisted food fight fantasy, matches where winning meant spanking your opponent with a paddle in front of millions, and matches where the objective wasn't to pin your opponent, but to throw them into the actual Gulf of Mexico. Oh, and let's not forget the time WWE unleashed live wild animals into the ring just to spice things up. This isn't just about violence, it's about the moments when WWE went too far and crossing the line between spectacle and pure madness. Some matches were banned because they were too dangerous, others because they were too degrading, and one of them is so disturbing you'll wonder how it ever aired in the first place. These are the banned WWE matches you'll never see again. The First Blood Match, a simple rule with savage consequences. The first man to bleed loses. It was brutal, primal, and everything WWE thrived on during the Attitude Era. Think Undertaker versus Stone Cold. Think Brock Lesnar tearing someone open with his fists. Back then, blood wasn't just tolerated, it was glorified. But here's the dirty little secret WWE doesn't like to admit. Blading, the act of secretly cutting your own forehead with a razor blade to produce blood, was standard operating procedure. The blade was either hidden in the wrestler's boot or was provided by the referee during the match. Wrestlers were literally slicing themselves for drama. That's not storytelling, that's self-mutilation. For ratings. Sometimes it worked, but other times, one shallow cut turned into a crimson mess. And in an era where lawsuits, CTE studies, and corporate sponsorships became real threats to WWE's empire, guy bleeding like a faucet on live television wasn't exactly kid-friendly content. Once WWE turned its attention to action figures, cereal boxes, and anti-bullying campaigns, the idea of blood as victory condition became toxic. Suddenly, you weren't a badass for making your opponent bleed. You were a liability. The First Blood Match wasn't just banned, it was erased. No tributes, no nostalgia, just a quiet burial of one of the most violent match types in wrestling history. Because when your entire match revolves around making someone bleed, eventually someone important was going to ask, wait, why are we doing this again? The Concrete Crypt Match. This wasn't a wrestling match, it was psychological torment disguised as entertainment. The Concrete Crypt Match is one of the darkest, most unsettling gimmicks WWE ever put on air. Not because of what happened in the ring, but because of what was happening just outside of it. The year was 2004, The Undertaker versus the Dudley Boys at the Great American Bash. But the real horror wasn't inside the ring, it was at ringside. Paul Bearer, The Undertaker's longtime manager, locked inside a glass crypt, slowly being filled with concrete. Rules: if Undertaker lost the match, Paul Bearer would be buried alive in cement, encased in a tomb of wet concrete, live on pay-per-view. But here's the twist that made this infamous. Even after Undertaker won the match, he pulled the lever anyway. Fans watched in shock as Paul Bearer was covered in concrete, gasping, pleading, submerged in real time. Was it scripted? Yes. But the danger, very real. Paul Bearer was actually inside that box and with an oxygen tank, but one wrong move, one crack in the seal, and WWE would have had a live televised death on their hands. The backlash was immediate. Critics slammed it as tasteless, and internally even WWE officials admitted it was pushing it too far. The Concrete Crypt Match has never been mentioned again on WWE programming. No highlight reels, no Hall of Fame callbacks, nothing. Because in an era of family-friendly TV, the image of a man being buried alive in cement? Yeah, not exactly PG. It wasn't just banned, it was buried, and this time, for real. The Blindfold Match. This wasn't just bad, it was a creative faceplant. The Blindfold Match, where two superstars wrestle each other while wearing black sacks over their head. And if that wasn't absurd enough, they booked it at WrestleMania 7. Jake the Snake Roberts versus Rick Martel had the potential to be a brutal, emotional grudge match. Instead, it became a glorified slapstick routine. Two men stumbling around like drunk uncles at a wedding, throwing punches at empty space, grabbing at ropes, air, and occasionally each other. The audience? Bored. The commentary team? Struggling to pretend it was suspenseful, and WWE? Instead of cutting their losses, they doubled down, running a few more blindfold matches on TV, each one more painful than the last. Eventually, even WWE realized the truth. When your gimmick turns serious wrestlers into clowns, it's time to throw in the towel. The blindfold match was quietly banned, not because it was too violent, but because it was too stupid to survive. The Gravy Bowl Match. If you ever needed proof that the Attitude Era had no shame, look no further than the Gravy Bowl Match. This was a real match type in WWE, and the rules: 2 women wrestling in a literal kiddie pool filled with lukewarm brown gravy. The winner, whoever managed to pin the other while slipping, sliding, and crawling through the sludge. This wasn't about athleticism. This wasn't about storytelling. It was softcore food porn disguised as sports entertainment. The most infamous example came during WWF's Thanksgiving special, where Trish Stratus and Stacy Keibler, 2 of the most talented and marketable women in wrestling, were reduced to gravy-soaked eye candy in front of millions of viewers, including families and children. It wasn't a wrestling match. It was a strip show in a soup bowl. Commentators laughed, crowds cheered, and behind the scenes, many of the women hated it. But in an era dominated by ratings, shock value, and the male gaze, their discomfort didn't matter. But the Gravy Bowl was no one-off mistake. It was part of a disturbing trend: mud matches, pudding matches, chocolate syrup matches, even eggnog fights. Different ingredients, same disrespect. Women were thrown into giant tubs of mess, forced to wrestle in bikinis, with the winner usually being the one who lost the most clothing. Wardrobe malfunctions weren't accidents. They were the main event. WWE promoted these matches under the illusion of comedy, but the reality was more sinister. Talented women were being turned into clickbait before the internet even knew what that meant. Today, WWE pretends these matches never existed. You won't find them on highlight reels. It won't show up in Women's Evolution tributes. And good luck hearing anyone backstage talk about it with pride. Because the Gravy Bowl wasn't just stupid. It was disgusting, degrading, and everything WWE is now pretending it never was. And while the footage might still be buried somewhere in the WWE Network archives, this match type has been permanently banned. In today's era of women main eventing WrestleMania and headlining pay-per-views, you'll never see another Gravy Bowl match again. Spank Me Match. If you thought WWE's history couldn't get any more bizarre or cringe-worthy, buckle up for the Spank Me Match. A match so ridiculous, it's almost hard to believe it actually aired on national television. The premise? Simple. A paddle was hung on a pole in one corner of the ring. 2 female wrestlers would fight to retrieve it, and once someone did, the loser would be bent over and publicly spanked in front of a live audience. No pinfalls or submissions. The winner was the one who could spank their opponent hardest and longest. Yes, in the middle of the ring, with thousands of fans watching, 2 grown women slapped and spanked each other, like a twisted playground game. This match type turned WWE from a sports entertainment powerhouse into a circus of humiliation. The match aired during the Attitude Era, a time when WWE pushed every boundary. Some for shock value, some for ratings, but this was a step too far. Fans voiced their outrage. Critics called it sexist, demeaning, and damaging to the sport's reputation. And the wrestlers. Many have spoken off camera about how humiliating it was to be forced into these matches just for ratings. Thankfully, as WWE evolved, this kind of degrading spectacle was swept away with the women's evolution and the company's move toward more respectful and athletic women's programming. The Spank Me Match was quietly banned, and rightfully so. The Crybaby Match. In 1996, WWE booked a match so humiliating, so cartoonishly awful, it might as well have aired on Nickelodeon, if Nickelodeon had a fetish for public humiliation. Razor Ramon versus the 1-2-3 Kid, 2 of the most respected wrestlers of their time, one a rising underdog, the other a future Hall of Famer, forced into a stipulation that turned them into literal toddlers in front of a live audience. The rules? Simple. Whoever lost had to wear a diaper, suck on a pacifier, and get powdered like a baby. This wasn't a punishment for a losing bet. This was televised pay-per-view wrestling. Watching grown men pretend to be infants didn't get laughs. It got groans. And for fans watching at home, it felt like an insult. 2 incredibly skilled performers were stripped of their credibility for the sake of a cheap gag. Razor Ramon, the bad guy, one of the coolest, most charismatic stars of the 90s, reduced to bottle feeding his opponent. And 1-2-3 Kid, one of the most innovative high flyers of his generation, now a literal punchline in a bonnet. What was WWE thinking? Even back then, fans were uncomfortable, and today, in a post-PG, image-conscious WWE, there is zero chance this would ever fly again. The Crybaby Match wasn't just banned because it was ridiculous. It was banned because it degraded the talent and insulted the audience, and WWE quietly made sure it would never happen again. The Hogpen Match. Mud, pig, slop. That wasn't a backstage prank. That was the actual match. Possibly the most degrading environment WWE ever asked its superstars to compete in. The concept? Wrestle your opponent inside a fenced-off pen, filled with real pigs, ankle-deep mud, and enough stench to make a porta potty seem luxurious. The rules? Basic. Win by pinfall or by throwing your opponent into the literal slop. It debuted in the mid-90s during WWE's infamous New Generation era, when gimmicks were everything and taste was nowhere to be found. The most infamous one? Triple H versus Henry O. Godwin. Yes, the game himself, future 14-time world champion, was once forced to grapple in pig feces for entertainment. Triple H technically won the match, but the punchline, he slipped, fell face first into the muck, and was covered in pig waste. Vince McMahon probably chuckled in the back, but here's the thing, nobody watching remembered the wrestling. What they remembered was the smell, the filth, and the sheer humiliation. And for a talent like Triple H, who was being groomed for main event potential, the Hogpen match was career sabotage dressed up as comedy. Behind the scenes, the pigs were reportedly agitated and hard to control, and the risk of injury was real. You try body slamming someone next to a squealing 300-pound hog and not blowing out your ACL. WWE never brought this match tight back in any serious capacity, because eventually even they realized something. Wrestling in pig slop isn't edgy in a business built on pride, legacy, and athleticism. This match reduced everything to a bad joke, and that's why the Hogpen match was quietly dumped into the same pit it came from. And trust us, no one's asking for it to return. The Bloodbath Match. Well, the first blood match isn't the only one involving blood. The Bloodbath Match was a ritual back in the day, popularized during the darker days of WWE's Attitude Era. Wasn't about pins or submissions. It was about humiliation and shock value. The end goal, drench your opponent in a torrent of fake blood, usually by pulling a hidden lever or triggering a dramatic backstage ambush. The Brood, Edge, Christian, and Gangrel were the ringleaders of this madness. They'd appear in eerie red lighting, cloaked in smoke, and unleash a bloodbath on unsuspecting superstars. It became a staple of early 2000s shock TV, and while it wasn't real blood, the imagery was unforgettable and deeply unsettling. 1 second, you're in a promo segment, the next, you're dripping in crimson goo under a spotlight. It blurred the line between horror movie and sports entertainment, and for younger viewers, it was nightmare fuel. But as WWE moved toward a PG product, the bloodbath was one of the first gimmicks to get flushed. Parents complained, sponsors raised eyebrows, and even performers felt it was going a little too far for primetime TV. Because in the end, dumping a bucket of blood over someone's head wasn't clever storytelling, it was grotesque, and WWE knew it couldn't clean that up. The Swamp Fight. The Swamp Fight was WWE's attempt to blend horror and wrestling, and it quickly spiraled into one of the weirdest, most unsettling cinematic matches ever. It happened at Extreme Rules 2020. Bray Wyatt lured Braun Strowman back to his roots for a non-traditional match deep in a murky, alligator-infested swamp. No ring, no rules, no clear ending. What followed was a chaotic fever dream, hallucinations, doppelgangers, mind games, and Braun literally being dragged underwater as the show faded to black. Not only was it confusing, but it also flirted with real danger. Swamps aren't film sets. They're unpredictable, wild, and full of hazards. Sure, it was meant to be cinematic, but drowning a wrestler on screen, even symbolically, crossed a line between dramatic and disturbing. WWE never went back to the swamp, because turning a horror short into a wrestling match might sound edgy, but when it ends in implied death and actual safety risks, yeah, that gets banned. Kiss My Foot Match. Yes, WWE really did this. A match where the loser had to literally get on their knees and kiss their opponent's filthy, fungus-ridden foot in front of a live crowd. The most infamous example? Bret the Hitman Hart versus Jerry the King Lawler at King of the Ring 1995. And Lawler went all in. In the weeks leading up to the match, he bragged on live television about not washing his foot. He said he kept it in a sweaty boot 24/7. Didn't just avoid soap. He allegedly allegedly stepped in horse manure to season it. Yes, WWE promoted this like it was WrestleMania. But the cherry on top, after losing the match, Lawler was forced to kiss Hart's foot and then vomited live on air. But it didn't stop there. Fast forward to the year 2000, and WWE doubled down on the humiliation with another version of this stipulation, this time involving Jim Ross and Michael Cole. In a moment so awkward it bordered on workplace abuse, Vince McMahon forced Jim Ross to kiss his own foot, but not before dousing it in barbecue sauce. As the crowd cringed in confusion, WWE loved to pretend it was comedy, but let's be honest, it was humiliation for the sake of humiliation. It wasn't wrestling, it was a power trip disguised as a gimmick. And in today's era of corporate sponsors and sanitized content, there's no way in hell WWE is even thinking about bringing this match type back. Because let's face it, nothing about this ages well. Not the smell, not the visuals, and definitely not the taste. Wild animal matches. Back in the 1980s, WWE wasn't just about punches and pins. It was about bringing the wild into the ring. Jack the Snake Roberts became infamous for carrying his live Burmese python Damien, terrorizing opponents and audiences alike. But the animal antics didn't stop there. On the October 4th, 1986 episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat decided to fight fire with fire, or rather, snake with something far scarier. Steamboat brought a live Komodo dragon to counter Roberts' slithering menace. The twist? The so-called Komodo dragon was actually a small crocodile. Yes, a live crocodile. The unpredictability of having real wild animals in the ring added a level of danger nobody was ready for. Steamboat managed to fend off Roberts' python with the crocodile, and scored a dramatic victory that night, avenging an earlier brutal moment where Roberts had slammed Steamboat's head onto exposed concrete, knocking him out cold. But this was more than just a spectacle. It was a risky, reckless stunt that blurred the lines between entertainment and endangerment. Live animals are unpredictable, stressed, and difficult to control, especially in a chaotic wrestling environment. This stunt might have looked cool on TV, but behind the scenes, it raised serious animal welfare and safety concerns for both performers and creatures alike. Thankfully, WWE quickly learned that mixing wild animals and wrestling was a dangerous gamble no one wanted to take again. No more live snakes, no crocodiles, just wrestling, because some wild ideas are better left in the jungle. The Gulf of Mexico match. Imagine a wrestling match with no ring, no ropes, no traditional rules. Just one simple, brutal objective: throw your opponent into the Gulf of Mexico. It was unlike anything you'd expect from the squared circle. If you could toss your opponent into the salty, unpredictable ocean waters, you won. Simple as that. It sounds almost comedic, a bizarre stunt more suited for a prank show than a wrestling promotion. But don't let the laughs fool you. This match was dangerous, unpredictable, and downright reckless. Take the infamous bout where CM Punk threw Chavo Guerrero into the Gulf to seal the victory. No mat to cushion the fall, no safety nets, just open water, waves, and who knows what lurking beneath the surface. Think about it. Wrestlers risked slipping, drowning, or getting injured on unseen hazards like sharp rocks, sudden currents, or marine life. This was no controlled environment. It was nature's chaos, and WWE was gambling with their performers' lives. And the consequences? Predictably, it didn't stick around. The match was banned not just because it was impractical, but because it was a liability waiting to happen. The ocean is no place for choreographed moves or scripted drama. In today's world, where wrestler safety is finally a priority, the Gulf of Mexico match stands as a stark reminder of wrestling's reckless past. No more tossing athletes into open water for entertainment. WWE learned the hard way that some venues just aren't venues at all. The Gulf of Mexico match was sunk for good, because when the ocean becomes your ring, the stakes are just too high. Mountain Dew Pitch Black Match. Now here's a match that proves just because something looks cool in a boardroom doesn't mean it belongs in a wrestling ring. The Mountain Dew Pitch Black Match was WWE's bold attempt at blending sports entertainment with corporate sponsorship, and what we got was a neon nightmare. At Royal Rumble 2023, Bray Wyatt faced LA Knight in WWE's first ever Mountain Dew Pitch Black match. A bout fought under blacklight, glowing ropes, neon paint, and near total darkness. The crowd couldn't see a thing, neither could the wrestlers. Moves were missed, timing was off, and what was meant to be eerie and cinematic quickly became clumsy and dangerous. Visibility for performers was compromised, communication in the ring was nearly impossible, and in a business where timing is life and death, one bad step in that pitch black mess, and someone could have gotten seriously hurt. WWE hasn't brought it back since. Not because it was too dark, but because even they realized it was a glowing, dangerous embarrassment better left buried. The World War III match. Before the Royal Rumble became king, WCW tried to outdo WWE with something bigger, literally. The World War III match featured 60 wrestlers, 3 rings, all at once. It was chaos, on purpose. The idea was to have 60 men fight simultaneously across 3 separate rings, with the winner being the last man standing. Think Royal Rumble, but triple the confusion. On paper, it sounded like an epic battle royal, but in reality, it was an absolute mess. The camera crew couldn't keep up, the commentators couldn't follow the action, fans had no idea where to look, and the in-ring action got buried in the visual overload. Even worse, the rules were constantly changing. Sometimes eliminations were over the top rope, sometimes not, and by the time it ended, fans were more exhausted than excited. It wasn't just sloppy, it was unwatchable. WCW ran it a few times in the late 90s, trying to make it their signature event, but once WWE bought them out, they locked this match type in the vault, because when a match becomes so bloated, it breaks its own logic. It's not epic, it's a disaster, and WWE made sure World War III would never return. So that's it, these were the matches that got banned by WWE for going way too far. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave us a like and hit that subscribe button, and let us know in the comments what banned WWE match shocked you the most. See you in the next one, only on Smackverse.